On March 29, 1975, Sharron Prior, a 16-year-old teenager, left home around 7 in the evening to go to the Marina Pizzeria, located just a few blocks from her residence in Montreal, Canada. What should have been a simple trip to the pizzeria on an Easter Saturday Eve transformed into one of the most brutal cases in Canadian criminal history, remaining unsolved for nearly half a century. Days later, her body was found on a private property, with signs of torture and sexual violence. The young woman who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian and was known for rescuing stray animals had her life brutally interrupted after 4 days of captivity. Stay until the end to discover how a simple men's shirt found at the crime scene kept the secret that would solve this case for 48 years. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe now and activate the bell to not miss any case as impactful as this one. To better understand this tragedy, we need to know who Sharron Prior was. Born in the winter of 1959 in Montreal, Sharon was the oldest child of a family with 4 siblings. Her father George served in the Canadian Army, while her mother, a British immigrant, dedicated herself to raising the children. After her parents' divorce in 1965, Sharon went to live with her mother and siblings in an apartment provided by a military family assistance program. From a young age, Sharon demonstrated extraordinary compassion, especially for injured or abandoned animals. She would rescue them from the streets, care for them until they recovered, and then find new homes for them. This love for animals inspired her to dream of becoming a veterinarian. In addition to this vocation, Sharon was a dedicated student, participated in the hockey club, and had a talent for arts, attending drawing and embroidery classes. At school, she stood out not only for her grades, but mainly for her ability to relate to all social groups. Unlike other popular teenagers, Sharon made no distinction between people, treating everyone with the same kindness and respect. This characteristic made her genuinely loved by classmates and teachers. Nobody could imagine that this same kindness would make her vulnerable to what was to come. The afternoon of March 29, 1975 had begun festively. Sharon spent hours helping her mother with Easter preparations, painting eggs, and organizing a treasure hunt for her younger siblings. Earlier, she and Stephen had gone to the local sports association to fetch a special jacket called Leo, named in honor of the founder's deceased brother who had died of leukemia. The disappointment of not finding her size available did not shake her festive spirit. Around 7 in the evening, Sharon asked her mother's permission to go to the Marina Pizzeria, a popular meeting point for teenagers. It was not the first time she had made this journey. The proximity of the establishment and familiarity with the path made it seem like a safe walk. Wearing a sweater borrowed from her mother and her favorite suede jacket, she left accompanied by a neighbor. Fate began to trace its fatal movements when the neighbor changed her mind and the girls separated. Sharon continued alone, unaware that she would be seen alive for the last time. A group of friends was already waiting for her at the pizzeria, including her boyfriend John, who was watching a hockey match at home. When he finally arrived at the establishment and did not find Sharon, the first sign that something was wrong began to manifest. In the same night, minutes after Sharon's disappearance, a disturbing incident occurred nearby. Cheryl Roy, a 23-year-old young woman, was attacked by an unknown assailant. The attacker, described as a tall man with dark hair and blue eyes, carried a knife. He wore a blue ski jacket and pointed-toe shoes. His voice was strangely calm while threatening the victim. Cheryl's screams attracted the attention of passers-by, causing the aggressor to flee precisely in the direction Sharon should have taken. Sharon's mother spent the night in the living room, waiting for her daughter's return. When dawn arrived with no news, a series of desperate phone calls began. Concern transformed into panic when she discovered that Sharon had never arrived at the pizzeria. The police initially hesitated to record the disappearance, suggesting waiting 24 hours, but the community did not wait. More than 100 volunteers mobilized in the search, scouring every corner of Montreal. On the morning of April 1, 1975, the Prior family was devastatingly shaken. The news of the body's discovery arrived not through official channels, but through a newspaper. A young man was seen removing the newspaper left at the Prior's house, a behavior that caught Sharon's mother's attention. Feeling something suspicious, she confronted the young man, who tried to dissuade her from looking at the content. Despite his protests, she managed to recover the copy. Upon opening the periodical, she was immediately confronted by an image that would confirm her worst fears. The photo of a young woman's body, found under brutal circumstances, was unmistakably that of her daughter. The pain of this discovery was amplified by the fact that the authorities, who should have already communicated with the family, failed to do so. The neighborhood knew before the Priors, transforming the moment into an even more traumatic experience. In shock, Sharon's mother, unable to personally identify her, asked her ex-husband to officially confirm that the body was indeed her daughter's. For 4 days, Sharon remained in captivity. The kidnapper's silence, no ransom request, no contact, only intensified the fear of the worst. On April 1st, a local resident made the macabre discovery on his property. The way the body was found suggested a meticulously planned crime. The door lock had been opened without signs of forced entry, as if the perpetrator had access to a key. Sharon's body was found on a private property on the outskirts of Montreal. The property owner reported unsettling circumstances. Despite always keeping all doors locked, that day he found one of the locks violated, but with no visible signs of forced entry, suggesting the perpetrator might have had access to a key. Curiously, nothing was stolen from the house, indicating that the crime did not involve robbery, but something premeditated and even more sinister. Sharon's body's condition revealed the extreme brutality of the crime. The autopsy and initial investigations highlighted the following details: jaw broken on both sides, fractured nose, a tooth violently pulled out, tearing her cheek, crushed ribs, possibly from someone kneeling on her chest, mouth firmly bound with adhesive tape, tape entangled in her hair, indicating desperate attempts to remove it, body partially undressed, with intimate clothing found hanging on a nearby tree. Tire marks were located about 15 meters from the body, beside a trail of blood drops. The absence of drag marks at the site indicated that Sharon was carried to the point where she was left. Clean shoes and socks reinforced this theory. Additionally, a men's shirt was found near the body, used to tie her wrists. Decades later, this piece would become crucial in solving the case. The killer demonstrated detailed knowledge of the area and care in not leaving obvious traces. The choice of location, crime timing, and body disposition indicated someone familiar with the region and experienced in avoiding detection. The evidence suggested that Sharon remained alive for a considerable period after the kidnapping, possibly succumbing to a combination of trauma and hypothermia. Police reluctance to record the disappearance was notable. While authorities suggested waiting 24 hours, the community took the initiative. Hundreds of volunteers scoured an area of approximately 60 square kilometers, including rugged terrain, dense forests, and mountainous regions of Montreal. After discovering the body, investigators initially identified 38 suspects, 6 of whom were temporarily detained. Frank Daly, manager of the Marina Pizzeria, was among the main investigated, but like the others, was released due to lack of evidence. The investigation gained broader dimensions by connecting the case with similar crimes in the region. In July 1974, Norma O'Brien, 12 years old, was found under similar circumstances. Her partially clothed body was in a field just a half-hour drive from where Sharon would be found months later. The victim showed the same signs of beating and strangulation. After Sharon's case, in June 1975, Debbie Fisher, 14 years old, disappeared while cycling. Her body was found in the forest, also naked. A 17-year-old young man confessed to this crime and O'Brien's murder, but his confirmed alibi excluded him from the Sharron Prior case. In 1978, the murder of Lisa Blah, 17 years old, presented new disturbing parallels. Her body was found a few meters from her house in Montreal, with signs of head blows and violation. The geographical proximity and similar modus operandi suggested a possible connection between the cases. From the beginning, the investigation was marked by failures. The police were slow to take Sharon's disappearance seriously, delaying initial searches. Despite this, hundreds of community volunteers mobilized, searching a vast 60-square-kilometer area. Although there was a collective effort, concrete clues were scarce. In 1995, a new blow struck the case. A large portion of the original evidence mysteriously disappeared from police archives. This loss seriously compromised future efforts to solve the crime. When the investigation was reopened in 2000, It was discovered that only the victim's clothing and some items possibly linked to the suspect had survived. These few objects would be crucial in later advances, but the gap left by the lost evidence made the process even more challenging. In 2004, a new lead took investigators to a garage where Sharon might have been held captive. 3 DNA samples were collected from the location, but none matched the material found in the original evidence. In 2012, a $10,000 reward was offered for information leading to the identification of the murderer. Investigators also explored connections with known criminals in the region. William Patrick, a Canadian serial killer convicted of murdering 5 women in Montreal, was considered a suspect, but claimed he only started killing in 1979. Mike French, a member of the Satan's Choice motorcycle gang who lived in the area in 1975, was also investigated, but his murder in 1982 during a gang war prevented further discoveries. The case seemed to find its resolution in June 2022, when advances in genetic genealogy allowed the identification of the DNA as belonging to Franklin Romine. However, a complication arose. Romine had died in 1982. His body needed to be exhumed to definitively confirm his guilt. In May 2023, after the positive DNA test result, investigators could finally trace the complete profile of the man who had escaped justice for so long. Romine was not a stranger to the region. At the time of the crime, he lived near Sharon's disappearance location. His car matched the tire marks found at the crime scene, and even more disturbing, he had a history of convictions for assault and sexual violence. The puzzle began to make sense, revealing how a predator managed to live for decades among the community without raising suspicions about his involvement in one of Montreal's most brutal crimes. The pieces of Franklin Romine's past began to fit together as investigators deepened their research. His profile perfectly matched the description provided by Cheryl Roy of the man who attacked her on the same night. Tall, dark-haired, blue-eyed, and with a strangely calm voice. The attack on Cheryl, now analyzed from a new perspective, seemed to have been a prelude to what would happen to Sharon. Only the presence of witnesses prevented Romine from making his first victim that night. His criminal history revealed a disturbing pattern of violence that began long before Sharon's murder. Previous convictions for assault and sexual violence demonstrated an escalation in his criminal behavior. The crime scene location was not random. Romine was well acquainted with the area, its blind spots, and times of least movement. This local knowledge allowed him to kidnap Sharon without witnesses and maintain her captivity for 4 days without raising suspicions. Particularly revealing was the method of entry into the property where the body was found. The violated lock without apparent signs of forced entry suggested that Romine had prior knowledge or access to the location. His familiarity with the region allowed him to avoid areas with more movement and choose an isolated location to abandon his victim. The shirt left at the crime scene, the evidence that would condemn him decades later, demonstrated a mixture of carelessness and confidence in his impunity. The same pattern would be observed in other attacks in the region that, although never officially connected to Romine, presented disturbing similarities in his modus operandi. The chronology of events suggested that Romine had meticulously planned every aspect of the crime. The initial attack on Cheryl Roy could have been an attempt to test the terrain or select a victim. When this attempt failed, he quickly adapted his plans, demonstrating the flexibility characteristic of an experienced predator. What most intrigued investigators was how Romine managed to avoid detection for so long, even after other attacks in the region had been connected. His ability to maintain a normal appearance in the community while hiding a violent nature was characteristic of serial criminals. His death in 1982, only 7 years after Sharon's murder, meant he would never face justice in a court. The post-mortem identification of Romine through DNA raised unsettling questions about his possible connection to other unsolved crimes in the region. The period between Sharon's murder and his death in 1982 coincided with a series of similar attacks in Montreal and surrounding areas. Although these connections can never be definitively proven due to his premature death, the behavior pattern and geographic proximity suggest that Sharon may not have been his only victim. The post-mortem DNA test finally provided the Prior family with something they had been seeking for almost half a century: the certainty of who had taken their daughter's life. But it also left unanswered questions about how many other families are still awaiting justice for crimes Romine may have committed during his years of freedom. The brutal story of Sharron Prior transcends the tragic murder of a 16-year-old in Montreal, becoming a watershed moment for Canadian investigative procedures. For 48 years, the family fought tirelessly for the truth, exposing vulnerabilities in the judicial system and inspiring profound changes in the approach to violent crimes. The resolution of the case in 2023, through modern DNA techniques, revealed much more than the identity of murderer Franklin Romine. It demonstrated how family persistence and technological advances can overcome decades of silence and impunity. The impacts were immediate and significant. Police departments across Canada were forced to re-examine evidence preservation protocols. Genetic databases gained strategic importance, transforming the investigative capacity to solve old crimes. For victims' families, the case represented more than late justice. It meant validating their suffering and hope that no crime will remain unpunished forever. The persistence of Yvonne Prior, Sharon's mother, became a symbol of resilience and determination. If this story touched you as it touched thousands of other people, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss other cases that need to be remembered and discussed. Until the next case.